For every blessing, give unto me, give unto me. For every valley, you used to strengthen me. I don't deserve. Greetings, everyone. We are live on YouTube exclusively here for the season finale. Can y'all believe it, guys? This is the season finale of the first season of the Lighthouse with Dr. T. We're 10 episodes in, deep in, and we are really excited about what God is doing in this season. So let me give y'all a little bit of time to jump on and everything. I did share it on Facebook to let you guys know where we are. Tell a friend of me, tell somebody that the Lighthouse with Dr. T is on. We have Apostle Joshua Smith in the house, which I am so excited about. And y'all, this is a real dude, okay? This real dude. So, so let's definitely join us as we get started with things, okay? Oh my goodness. Come on. So amazing, so amazing, your sacrifice for me, for every blessing, give unto me, give unto me. For every valley. Like I said, be sure to let people know we're on YouTube tonight, and because you don't want to miss this conversation. So when you do come on, let me know where you're from, who you are, and so we can definitely shout out to you on the live. All right, of course, this would be acting up now when I'm trying to use something different. Okay, that's all right. We'll just do something different this time. All right. Okay. All righty. All right. Well, I know some of you are probably just adjusting to the fact we're here. So those of you that when you join us, you will. And I'm just excited about what God is doing in this season. And the reason why I was trying to play amazing is because that's exactly what this has been. It's been an amazing year. You know, it's amazing that when you make a courageous move in God and when you step out on water and He meets you, it's amazing that you kind of wonder to yourself, why didn't I do this a long time ago? Because you would have had all these things already started. But I give God the glory because for Beacon of Hope Champions, for Lighthouse with Dr. T, it's been amazing. The guests that I've had on this season, ranging from people who are grief coaches, mental health practitioners, those who dealt with trauma informed care, to those who have dealt with narcissistic abuse and survived and are helping so many others. And so here we are at the end of our first season, but it's only just the end of the first season, but it's going to begin again because I understand that we are in a day and time that we need safe spaces to be honest and tell the truth so we can get free, so we can get the healing we need, and and be real about who we are. And even though, yes, we're people of faith, but we're also people who are broken and have issues, so why not talk about it? All right, so let's get into it. Tonight, we are coming to the close of Mental Illness Awareness Week. It was this whole week, and so it closes as of today. And in part with that, we're going to talk about something that I know all of us can say we are familiar with in some way or another, and that's anxiety. And tonight I have a guest that's going to help me, get through this, as well as I'm sure other things, some nuggets and some jewels that he's going to share that's going to really help us all tonight. So let's talk about anxiety for a moment. We got some myths about it. And being that Apostle's a licensed clinician, I'm sure he understands, probably heard some of this stuff. They talk about several myths around anxiety, like it's not a real medical problem. They say it's only temporary. Yeah, it'll go away. Or they'll say medications are the only way to manage it. Or they'll say, like, well, maybe that's just their way of trying to seek for attention and try to get attention from people. Now, of course, now we know not that is true. As a matter of fact, according to NAMI, the National Alliance of Mental Illness, over 40 million adults, 19.1% of people in this country, have an anxiety disorder. And then approximately 7% of children ages 3 to 16 experience issues with anxiety every year, and most people develop symptoms before the age of 21. And some who are in the faith, those of us who are in the church, consider anxiety to be some form of faith crisis because it challenges what they believe. And that could be very painful. And at times it rocks someone's core of their belief system. And it can further complicate one emotional landscape, add panic, desperation to their faith journey. And so, how, as faith leaders, can we, better approach when it comes to someone who deals with anxiety to make sure we're not demonizing it, but we're actually seeing it for what it is? And for most, it's a clinical diagnosis. So, tonight, my guest, as I told him, he is one of the examples that I admire and I look up to when it comes to ministry and marketplace. And his example has been what I have learned from, been encouraged from, to go forth and doing what you all see me doing today. So let me just read this little bio here and then we're going to get into it. So, whereas many people choose to live a life of complacency and comfortability, he constantly challenges others to level up both personally and professionally. And as a licensed professional counselor, mental health and wellness coach, and mentor to many, Joshua P. Smith is best known for his balanced and holistic approach to life, ministry, and marketplace, empowering others to live purposely and passionately. He specializes in stretching people beyond their self-limiting beliefs and perceived capacity, positioning them to do things they never thought they could do. And with more than 25 years of ministerial experience and 14 years of experience in the mental health and counseling, Joshua's mandate is to help people unearth their potential, pursue purpose fulfillment, and sharpen the lives of others for the advancement of the kingdom. A multifaceted individual, this best-selling author, international speaker, and entrepreneur is highly sought after spiritual advisor to many people inside and outside the four walls of the traditional church. And he's often called upon for his ability to successfully merge Christ-centered theology with evidence-based theories, practices, and techniques of psychology, teaching people how to transform and renew their minds with the Word of God through the Soul Healing Initiative and the Soul Healing Training Academy. Internationally, Joshua is a member of the Jamaica Diaspora Task Force Action Network, serving on the Behavioral Health Task Force since 2016. Joshua has served as the senior apostle of the House of Healing International and Apostolic Training Center and Network of Churches, IFHCM, and headquartered in Gulfport, Mississippi. There, he serves faithfully with the love of his life, elect Lady Rihanna Smith, committed wholeheartedly to equipping disciples and leaders for the ministry and marketplace. And he is a noted trainer of prophets, intercessors, and other fivefold ministry leaders around the world. And he is the proud father of a beautiful baby girl named Zoe. So, ladies and gentlemen, family and friends, please welcome to the Lighthouse with Dr. T, none other than Apostle Joshua P. Smith. Greetings. How are you doing?
Greetings. Grace and peace to you. I'm well. How are you?
Doing wonderful, doing wonderful. Thank you for joining us on tonight. We really greatly are excited. I'm greatly humbled to have you here. All right, so let's get into it, Apostle. So, from your perspective, being a licensed clinician yourself, as well as also a faith leader, how real of an issue anxiety is? How real is it?
Yeah, well, it's very real. It's not something that is made up or something that is just in the head. We know about anxiety that it is a feeling of worry and nervousness and uneasiness that is a pattern, and it's a consistent pattern.
Mhm.
And so anxiety is not just the thoughts, even though it can start with a thought and often does start with a thought. But anxiety is also our body's response to
Mm.
situations that we are interpreting as threatening. And so it's very real because it's not just thoughts, it is the result of the thought, which is the feeling that comes. And as you were going into the statistics, I thought about the fact that 18.1% statistically, uh,
Mm-hmm.
this was prior to the pandemic, so those numbers have probably
Mm-hmm.
skyrocketed, but 18.1% of individuals deal with anxiety. So that's about 42 million people in the United States
Wow.
that have an anxiety disorder.
Right. Mm-hmm.
And because most people don't realize that it's anxiety, um, that kind of it's the most prevalent emotional health disorder. But because people don't understand what anxiety is, only about 30 to 33% of individuals actually seek treatment for anxiety.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
it is the most prevalent, and it is more prevalent than depression. It's very real.
Right. And so you were saying also that there's only so many people that go and actually get treatment for it. So that means there's an amount, several people that don't, and they choose that they're suffering in silence, or maybe they don't know what resources to get. They don't know how to go about, getting the help that they need. So with that being said, tell me from the aspect of, okay, we understand how real it is. We understand that it's definitely a pattern. How are people who may be dealing with someone that's affected by that? What can they do to be supportive or helpful in the sense of maybe they can get treatment or without being judgmental? I mean, what can they do?
Yeah, and this answer is going to be the same for any type of disorder or sickness or disease, whether it be mental or physical or emotional. It's going to be to
Mm-hmm.
listen and to be empathetic. And so when we're empathetic, we may not be able to uh, connect personally with that person is experiencing, but we're able to be aware of what they're feeling. We're able to be compassionate toward them, to be patient with them, and just have conversations with them so that they can give us what they're experiencing in their reality. So it really requires a person to be open and to be empathetic and to be
Mm-hmm.
aware of the emotions of the person that they're dealing with.
Okay, so let's deal with it from the aspect of, well, us. African Americans. Us. I say us because that's the reason why I say it like that. Us, that's how we deal with it. Because a
Yeah.
lot of times with our culture, it's been considered to be something like a weakness. It's been considered to be something like, well, why would you? Well, he gets great. They label it in all kinds of ways, even in church. In the black church they do that. I mean, the reality is that I believe anxiety affects a lot of people behind the scenes more than they care to admit. Because I know I've been affected by it, and then there were things I've had to learn the difference between. There's nervousness, and then there's anxiety, and there's all. I've learned all these different things. So, I mean, if we know this is a reality, you know, why would we treat it like it's a disease that they don't want to catch or they don't want to deal with? I mean, how can we be, like you said, you want to listen and be more empathetic? What's the barrier
Yeah.
there?
Well, there's several barriers. One of the main ones being where people don't understand they're going to reject, demonize, etc. Hosea, if we can go biblical for a moment, Hosea said, "My
Yes,
people are
please.
destroyed for lack of knowledge." And so, when we don't have knowledge of a thing, it leads to destruction. However, destruction shows up. And
Mhm,
so when people don't understand a thing, again, I say that they're going to reject it, they're going to dismiss it, they're going to distance themselves from it, all of that. And so we have to come into a greater understanding, which is why we have these type of platforms to bring understanding through awareness.
mhm,
To
mhm.
decrease the stigma, I always tell people that information and knowledge will decrease stigma. Uh,
Yeah.
it will cause the conversation to be somewhat normalized because, again, if you look at those numbers, that's a lot of people. And I always give numbers when I do presentations and teachings and webinars and all of that because I want people to know how real it is,
Mhm.
again, to kind of normalize
Yeah.
what's another barrier, particularly for not just the African American church, so to speak, but African Americans and those who are not in the majority. One of the
Mhm,
things that had happened is that we didn't have proper language and vernacular for
mhm.
what was being experienced. So, like I alluded to earlier, people were experiencing things, and you know alluded to it as well, but just didn't know what it was, wasn't able to differentiate between this and that. And so, one of the things that you hear, particularly among elder African Americans, you hear things like, "Well, I'm nervous," or "My nerves are bad."
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah,
hmm
I need
hmm
to take a nerve pill. And
yeah,
so
yeah,
what begins to happen is when we don't properly label things, we don't have
mm,
a proper name for it, then we don't really know what to do with it. So I always tell people, what if it's anxiety, depression, whatever it is, personality disorder, schizophrenia, whatever it is, you need to label it. You need to label it as such so that you know how to treat it.
right.
I can, put this in here to kind of make more sense to those that are in the religious sector.
hmm
I also say name it, but don't claim it.
Right. Okay.
So
Okay.
you need to be able to put a label on it and say, this is what it is. It's not nerves. It's not, I got a nerve problem. I take my nerve pill. No, call it anxiety. That way you can continue to get what we call psychoeducation, and you
hmm
can get proper treatment.
Right. Right. You said something that has been kind of a commonality amongst the um, the episodes that I've had this year, which is language.
Sure,
Language is a very powerful thing
sure.
in that how we name things, how we label things, how we refer to them has a lot to do with a reference point if someone desires to go forth in doing intentional healing. I know for me, with my experience, I dealt with being in a relationship with someone that was narcissistic, and I didn't know that what effects I was dealing with some of the brain fog, the over anxiety I was dealing with, some of the things that just wasn't clicking like it normally was in my head. I didn't realize that those were effects of what narcissistic abuse is. And
Right,
it wasn't until I was courageous enough to put a name to something. Okay, I think we need to talk about that. It wasn't until I was courageous enough to put the name to it,
yeah,
speak it, and say, this is the problem,
right,
or speak and say, this is why I feel less than, I don't have any, I feel I don't have no value.
right.
This is the reason. It's just putting the name to it.
Mhm.
That's really a powerful thing because it determines how someone can perceive something.
Sure,
Because if you just talk about it in just sometimes general common terms, everybody has perceptions of what that particular term or language could mean depending on what they've been through in their life.
right.
So can we talk about what does it take to finally just admit, say, this is the problem? I'm going to name it.
Mhm.
What's that like? Finding that courage to do that.
Sure. Well, you've already said it is it's courage. And when we find that courage, eventually what begins to happen is you get tired of being in denial
Mm,
about, what this is. So, you're going to go get treated. And when I'm talking about mental and emotional health, I always, excuse me, try to tie it back to physical health to get people to understand. So you can only go for so long with having a physical pain. Let's just say a toothache. Like you can only go so long with that problem, and that something is wrong, it's
mhm,
a tooth, right? It's
mhm.
your mouth. That's very generic, but there's going to come a time where you're going to get tired of the pain. Like
Yep.
the pain that you're experiencing is going to continue to increase, and as that pain increases, your level of tolerance is going to decrease for it. So that
Mhm.
means that you're going to get up and you're going to make an appointment, whether it's an emergent appointment or not. You're going to make an appointment,
Right.
see how can I get this taken care of. And so it takes courage, yes, but sometimes it takes a little pain. It takes a
Mhm,
little pain
mhm,
to
mhm.
push people not only into purpose, but to push people into problem solving.
Yeah, but then it's like something I've said before. Your perception about pain has to change, though,
Yeah,
to push you to do
absolutely,
that.
absolutely.
To not see it as something that is a negative that is just always going to be there, and you choose to go through the motions of it, but you actually use that pain to push you to get
Yeah.
the solutions. But here's my question about that, since you bring that up, because I've mentioned this before, but I would like to definitely get your perspective on it. Why is it that people know to do that when it comes to their physical disorders, their physical conditions,
Right.
easy enough? But when it comes to their emotional and mental well being, I mean, the brain, which in a sense is connected to really everything else that functions in our physical body.
Mhm.
Why is it they don't give it that same consideration versus what they normally do with the physical body?
It's because we don't have conversations like this. And so since we don't have conversations like this, we, general term, we assume that this is not normal. This is not something that I should be. I've heard people say that to me, I shouldn't feel this way, or this shouldn't be happening to me. And then I have to explain to them, you are body, soul, spirit. And so
Uh-huh.
all of those components of you have to maintain, right? You have to maintain. There has to be maintenance that goes into that. And so we just don't have conversations like this often. And this is why this is important. We don't have these conversations, so people just don't know, right?
Mhm.
They just don't know. And so it doesn't click for them because we've grown up cultured with the fact that, when you have a physical pain, that you go to the doctor,
Mhm.
right? You go to the emergency room. That's normal. That
Mhm.
that is what we would call culturally acceptable.
Right. Uh-huh.
And that's because that's the pattern. That's what we've grown up doing. That's what we've grown
Right.
up seeing. But you don't always see that as it relates to mental and emotional health. Even in some cultures, you do, because some cultures will tell you, "No, I'm going to see my therapist today." Like it's not a
Right.
I'll sneak in there with sunglasses and nobody knows I'm there. Like,
Mhm.
no, this is a part of my day. Like this is
Mhm.
my wellness. And
Mhm.
until we come to that where it's just normalized, it's things that we talk about every day because we're dealing with it, then the level of shame will decrease with that stigma.
Absolutely, absolutely. I'm glad you mentioned that about honest conversations because that's one of the aspects of not only just my ministry, but one of the aspects of what we're doing with NAMI with the new conversational format they have for the Sharing Hope Initiative that addresses the mental health challenges specifically for those of Black and African ancestry. And I've been one of the first in the nation to present this to people, and we're going to do the second conversation actually later on this month. To and we're going to have a mental health counselor there of African descent, but we're doing this because we're like we are not talking enough.
Right.
We're not talking enough. We're not saying what's the problem. We're not giving people space to say, okay, look, I got an issue.
Right.
And another thing too, if you want to flip it to the faith leader aspect, is that we as leaders, even pastors, preachers, apostles, or what have you, the power that our words have from the pulpit
Definitely.
have weight.
Definitely.
And the thing is that I feel that now I know some like you and others that are doing it, but being more inclusive in their messaging
Hmm.
about people that deal with mental health issues, because there's plenty of stories in the Bible about it,
Hmm.
as we know. And so I guess my question with that is that how can we encourage more of those honest like this, how can we encourage those honest conversations? And if we see someone that's dealing with some, let's say you can see the symptoms of anxiety, how can we encourage the conversations? How can we talk about it without feeling uneasy?
Yeah. So to answer that, I'm more of a grassroots person.
Hmm.
So I believe in major and I've done it. Major stages, major platforms, being able to reach wider audiences.
Hmm.
But this type of thing, my mindset is grassroots because there are people in our families, there are people in our friend groups, there are people that we work with that are having these issues. And so if we just normalize it on a lower level where we are. Like, so what I'm saying is that we open up our heart and open up our ears to those that are simply around us.
Right, right, right.
A major undertaking, it starts with those small things because again, if we look at the numbers, more people are
Mhm.
dealing with this than we know
Right.
or that we
It's
care about.
common. It's common.
Very common. So this is a conversation, after or before or after a football game. I'm just saying, like, you
Okay. Okay.
what's going on with you, like what are you experiencing, what are you feeling, and if somebody's in that conversation that's knowledgeable, they're able to kind of direct it. You don't have to be a counselor, you just have to have some knowledge to direct, like, hey, I think that kind of sounds like
Mhm.
this, or that sounds like what I dealt with personally, that sounds like what a family member of mine dealt with. So having those conversations wherever we are
Okay.
want to be the key, and not
Okay.
waiting until we have, a larger audience, or some people
Mhm.
are event minded, and I love events, but it doesn't always have to be an event. There are
Mhm.
people that you interact with every day that you can just simply have a conversation with.
I've always said that, with my ministry and just who I am, that it's not about a pulpit and a lectern or anything like that. My pulpit can be anywhere,
Sure.
wherever conversations I can have. I found that it's more powerful when it comes to ministry when it's done intimately because there's room for openness and acceptance and non judgment. And when people know that it's safe to just
Right.
be. And I
Right.
think that's another thing that's also an issue at times. You were just talking about, in a sense that we just got to make influence where we are,
Right.
wherever our circle is. That's where
Right.
you start. And
It's a,
I've shared that, that it's really just where you start. And like you said, you don't have to know it all. If you know something, you can be, willing to, what, I want to find something out, or we'll see what we can do. But you don't have to go do this alone,
sure.
in this sense. Okay, so when we talk about anxiety, I'm going to flip this for a second. And I know some people are not probably not going to like me, but that's all right. I'm radical like that. It's okay. Um, I want to talk about from the aspect of leadership, faith leaders,
Okay.
that
Okay.
behind the scenes they deal with anxiety, but for whatever reason they choose not to deal with it or not to voice it, not to say anything because they don't want to be perceived a certain way by people. Um, how would you address someone that may be, because you have to understand if they're in leadership, what they do is going to affect the flock that they're responsible for serving and
Absolutely.
ministering to. So how would you deal with someone like that that's like, well, I'm gonna be okay, I'm gonna be all right, I'm good, that kind of stuff, when you know that's not what happened, that they're about to break or snap in any minute. We're dealing
Yeah.
with anxiety behind the scenes.
Yeah. So that's a multi-layered answer. So I'm gonna let them be good. Like, if they say that they're good, I'm gonna let them be good.
Mm-hmm.
Excuse me. But however, I'm going to challenge. Depends on the level of relationship, and if I've been called in to do something, I'm going to challenge them to see it from the perspective that you just gave. That this is not just, in leadership, you don't have the luxury of having, if I can say it this way, and it be understood, you don't have the luxury of having personal problems.
Say that again. Say that again.
Yeah,
Yes.
you get when you become a leader, you give all of that up, and people don't understand that. They just see leadership positionally and being able to give orders and control. But it's really the servant leadership model, which I've been teaching on
Mm.
this year, is really the Jesus model where you lay down your life. Paul said, I'm a prisoner. Nobody put me here, forced me here. I'm a willing prisoner of Christ. I live in a fishbowl. I have people watching me all of the time, and so you really kind of give up your right to have personal problems, even though you
Mm.
have personal problems. But what I mean by that,
Yeah.
so that people can understand with clarity, is that your personal problems, if they're not dealt with, now begin to affect those that you're leading.
Yeah.
Yeah, because everything, Proverbs 4:23 tells us to guard our heart with all diligence.
Mm-hmm.
Everything you do flows from it.
Mm-hmm.
Luke 6:45, out of the abundance of the heart, the mouth speaks. So
Mm-hmm.
you really don't have the luxury of just holding it in and not dealing with it, because if you do, it's going to bleed out
Mm-hmm.
incessantly on the people that you serve. And they're going to be a byproduct of whatever is going on with you. So once we kind of get leaders to understand that, then I believe the conversation becomes a bit easier. And it also becomes easier for them to get the help that they need, even if they're not going to let people know what's going on right then. Just get the help. And as you're on that journey, you're going to learn so much about yourself, and you're going to experience so much freedom that nobody's going to have to tell you to share it,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
because you're going to have that, internally. You'll no longer be in guilt or shame.
Right. So when you say that, and I'm asking you this, not only just, you being a clinician, but also being an apostle,
Sure.
being a pastor of pastors, in that sense, you know, because, and I know for me, because, I've pastored before, there's always the question of like, who can the shepherd turn to?
Hmm.
when they're hurting? Where can they go?
Yeah.
I know for a long time when I was a pastor's wife, I felt like the loneliest person in the church because I didn't really have nobody I could turn to. And a lot of the things that I dealt with, I was forced to internalize
Hmm.
because I didn't have an outlet to go.
Yeah.
So, and, pastors, and of course, pride can get in the way too, because they're like, whatever, I don't want to deal with it. But what could what outlet could they be able to find, or can they look into to get the help that they need, like you're talking about, and being able to overcome those things so they can be better for the people that they serve.
Right. So I'm an apostle, as you said. So my answer to that is going to be apostolic.
Okay.
If you don't see something, you build it.
All right. Yes, sir.
So, I've been doing this a lot of years on both sides, ministry and marketplace. And so I know that there are things out here, but sometimes people can't find it legitimately. But then
Hmm.
you have to kind of kick over into that gear of, well, I need this, or if I
Hmm.
need it, somebody else needs it. So let's create something. Let's be creative. Let's tap into the mind of God, which is creative, and
Hmm.
let's create something that solves this problem and meets this need, which is also leadership.
Yeah.
So when pastors tell me that they don't have that safe place, I understand what they're saying, but I also kick into that problem solving mode like, okay, why haven't you created this or
Hmm.
fostered this?
Hmm.
Because if you really have the will, wilt thou be made whole. If
Oh
you
my
have the
gosh.
will to be healed and made whole, you're going to do whatever it takes. And as a leader, you're going to naturally bring people with you. So
Hmm.
if a leader is watching and they're in their city, their region, and they're not seeing this, they're like, where can the leader reach out to? And again, it's true. We say it, but sometimes we say it as just something to say,
Hmm.
just to whine, or it's a cliche for us.
Right.
Encouraging anybody that's watching live or replay to build what you don't see.
Mm. Wow. You know what? I'm grateful that you said that because I believe a lot more leaders need to do that. Because I do run into situations with some even faith leaders in this region and and others to say, well, I just didn't no, right?
Yeah.
But but I remember the first few episodes of the season, we focused on pastors and leaders being first responders to mental, first aid, and saying that with all the information that's out there now, especially post pandemic, if you think about it, because a lot of this really didn't come out more into focus and more into a more prevalent uh, presence in people's hearing and looking until really the pandemic happened because a lot of people were not coming to church and things that normally would be covered up in routine all of a sudden started showing up at home, and then they realized, when they hold up, this probably has been here the whole time.
Yeah.
And so you're seeing all of that, and now it's almost like you see more pastors and leaders being open to say,
Right.
what, we got an issue, but at the same time, you still have some that kind of stuck in their ways in a sense. And it's like, well, there's really no excuse because there's too much information out there. There's too much resources out there. So it's all about the will of what you want to see done and change
Mhm.
in your life, because when you make them see that it's something they can build and create for their ministry to help the people, it makes a difference. So I definitely I see what you mean by that. I do.
Yep. Yep. Absolutely.
Okay. So you being the clinician yourself, and you've been one for a long time. And as far as anxiety, have you've treated, I'm sure, people with anxiety before and dealing with that as well.
Mhm.
Um, have you had cases where you've seen people who have been successful in managing their anxiety, where they're able to live a healthy life? Or have you seen those that sometimes it's just been a struggle up and down, basically kind of a constant thing that they just deal with, just up and down, up and down?
I'll start with the last question. So I have seen the up and down. I've
Mhm.
seen the inconsistency of effective treatment, so to speak.
Mhm.
And when I've seen that, it's generally been for two reasons. It's been number one, because the person was inconsistent in
Mhm.
their maintenance. Because
Mhm.
it may or may not be something that just kind of goes away. It may be something that is somehow genetically wired in you that you have to manage through.
Okay.
This is the importance of going and seeking professional help so you can get assessed properly and have someone kind of follow you and give you language and treatment for what it is that you're going through specifically, because it could be something we dealt with pandemic anxiety. So
Okay.
I did a whole webinar on that because that, once you're in, it's kind of like situational depression. Once you're in that, you're
Okay.
feeling that because we're in a collective traumatic experience. But once it starts to lift, then you notice that your anxiety level decreases, but you still may have some anxiety because now your brain, because it works by repetition, your brain
Mhm.
is now used to responding to things a certain way, even though it's not being threatened in that same way.
Okay. Okay.
So you have to really walk through some professional help, with that. So it's just, individual results. It's really based on individual results. But usually that person that is unsuccessful in treatment is a person that hasn't been consistent,
Okay.
their coping skills, consistent in the tools that they've been taught, because therapy is not about venting. It's about getting the tools that you need,
Okay.
the strategies that you need to live your life better.
Mhm.
Another reason that I've seen it be unsuccessful and people kind of revert back or go back and forth is because of trauma.
Mhm.
Trauma that wasn't dealt with. And when we have trauma, which is a whole nother topic, you have an event or events that happen, and then you have so many tentacles, so much fruit, shall I say, from that trauma.
Mhm.
So I begin to see in practice that once we start dealing with trauma, things like depression start to disappear, if you got me. Because really that was just a symptom.
Yeah. Yeah. Uh-huh.
So on the flip side, to answer your first question, I've definitely seen individuals do very well. They've taken the coping skills, they have applied them to their lives. They're continually doing it. And most of the people, I will say about 95% of people that I treat in my private practice with anxiety, because that's one of my specialties, they have
Mhm.
done so without any medication.
Wow.
And they
Okay.
continue to be successful because they continue to use the tools that have been given.
And be
Right.
consistent in it. Yeah.
Right. And so there are times, the other 5 or so percent, sometimes the anxiety level is so high that something needs to be prescribed to get the brain and the central
Mhm.
nervous system back
Mhm.
to a baseline function.
Mhm.
Once we get the baseline functioning back through the medication, then
Mhm.
we can begin to do some work. But
Right.
you can't really hear me if you can't hear me in therapy if your brain is in overdrive.
Right. Yeah. Absolutely.
So we need to give you something, refer you out so you can get a pill, and it's not permanent, but
Mhm.
let's try this 30, 60 days and see how the anxiety decreases, and also pair that talk therapy, that CBT,
Mhm.
coping skills,
Cognitive based. Yeah.
and so you can start coming off the medication. But this is the things that people don't really know because they don't do
Mhm.
therapy, they don't seek the help.
Right.
And so they may say, I'm feeling this. They told me to get medication. I'm gonna have to be on this all of my life, and my face says I can't take. Let's get some information and some knowledge, because we're destroyed for the lack of it. Let's get this knowledge, and then
Mhm.
you can understand that this probably won't even be something that I have to be on long term. There's a
Mhm.
why behind the reason. There's a reason why that
Mhm.
clinician may have put you on that medication. But if you don't
Mhm.
go and get the help, you don't know what your treatment plan is going to look like.
Right, exactly. Now, let me go back to something you just mentioned about anxiety, that it could also be genetic.
Sure.
How is that? As how can anxiety be genetic? Is something hereditary?
Yeah. So, we pass things on through our genetic pool, we pass things on through our bloodline, and that's not always a generational curse. It's
Okay.
just something that's wired in the genetics. Now, if you want to look at it as a generational curse, which takes me somewhere else and I'm coming back, if you
Yes,
want
sir.
to look at it that way, it may not be something that needs to be dealt with spiritually. So if you want to call it a
Hmm.
generational curse,
Hmm.
just
Hmm.
say it that way. If you want to call it a generational curse, there is something that's been continuing it, and it may or may not be something spiritual. So, example, if everyone in your family has dealt with diabetes, now we got to go back and look at what are the generational patterns
Right.
that are informing and pushing and promoting this generational curse.
Mm-hmm.
And most things, just take me back to the main street, most things that we call generational curses are really generational traumas.
Okay, please. Okay, help us. Help us tonight, please. Go say that again, please. Okay.
It's generational trauma. So when you begin
Mm-hmm.
to study, and this is homework for those that are watching, you study the theory of epigenetics. You begin to see that they're doing research. They have done research in the past on like survivors of the Holocaust.
Mm-hmm.
So those survivors, because they had such fear and anxiety and such weight on them,
Mm-hmm.
it became a part of their makeup. It
Mm-hmm.
got into their DNA, their molecular structure. So they begin to pass down generationally,
Mm-hmm.
generational trauma. They begin to pass down these different feelings of anxiety.
My gosh. Okay. Okay. Okay.
You got people into the third and fourth generation who didn't go through the Holocaust, but because it was something experienced by their family, and we
Right.
can reproduce after our own kind. Now that's just being passed down. So that's how one of the ways that it can become genetic. They also begin to study, mice. That's their favorite thing to tamper with as it relates.
Okay.
Oh, study mice, and then beginning to realize that if the mother mouse, so to speak, experienced something traumatic, she
Mm-hmm.
now passes that on genetically to her child.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So it's not something that happened to the child, but because the mother has this fear response, it's now going to the child. And then you have the fear response and the conditioning, because if the mother mouse is essentially trying to protect
Mm-hmm.
the child mouse from danger that they perceive,
Mm-hmm.
then now it's something that is genetic, it's biological, and it's also something that is in the system of how we run things in this family. Example. So if a parent experienced, a human parent
Mm-hmm.
experienced something violent, they're probably going to try to keep their child sheltered
Yes.
from
Yeah.
that. So now
Yeah.
they begin to say things like, don't do that, don't go there. Don't. And so now it's not only something that's genetic potentially, but it's something that you're passing down through language. So it's
Mm-hmm.
learned behavior. Now
Mm-hmm.
learns. It's not just I can't talk to strangers, I can't talk to nobody. But that's
Right.
not
Yeah.
because something happened to the
Yeah.
child. That's something that happened to the parent.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Right, right. Well, it's interesting that you say that because I was, my for my life, I was adopted when I was 3 days old. And a lot of what I dealt with untreated for years, maybe like 30 years, I didn't have. I had depression for that long, battling it. And I did 3 unsuccessful attempts of suicide. Three. The last one was when I was pregnant with my youngest son, Josiah. And fortunately, God, worked that out because my ex at the time talked me through it because I was trying to drown myself in the bathtub with my unborn son on Christmas Day. Um, but I knew, I said, wait a minute, God, I'm struggling here. Where did this come from?
Mhm.
Because I don't remember experiencing I know the trauma of being adopted and dealing with rejection and abandonment, but where did this come from? And when I did a little bit of research, asking some family members on my biological side, was when I found out that there was a genetic mental illness that runs in my family. I had an aunt that was committed to an institution, for mental illness. I also found out that even ADHD kind of ran in the family because my son has it, but the dominant gene comes from female. I had no idea that I had it myself, dealing with all of that. And so, but once you are willing to do the work to figure all of that stuff out,
Sure.
it kind of just makes sense. Okay, now that I understand it, then the question becomes for me, which I'm doing that now, said how do you healthily manage it? And you were also talking about trauma too. And I know for my last guest, we were talking about faith-based trauma. A lot of times there's two ways that you can deal with trauma. You can frame your life around it, or you can face it.
Right.
And a lot of people tend to frame their life around trauma
Mhm.
rather than facing it to overcome it and do what needs to be done. Let me ask you another question with that. When it comes to anxiety, is a lot of anxiety rooted in trauma, or is it or rooted in other things besides trauma?
Hmm. So, I'll just say that that's different for everybody, but that's definitely something that we see a high case of because, again, back to the definition I gave, that anxiety is that feeling of worry and nervousness and uneasiness. And so, when you've experienced trauma, that could very well be a byproduct because you're worried about, what happened to me in the past is going to happen to me again,
Mm-hmm.
or I'm just uncertain. It's the fear of the unknown. I'm uncertain about what's going to happen in the future because of what happened in the past. So trauma is really one of those things that just changes the course of a person's life and
Mm-hmm.
can produce basically what it wants to. Until you deal with it, it can produce what it wills in your life. And so if that's anxiety, it'll be anxiety. If that's depression, if it's both,
Mm-hmm.
you know it'll be both. But as you said, you have to face that, and then as you're going through the process of healing, begin to deal with all of those connected
Mm-hmm.
symptoms and issues that are tied back to that event that caused you the trauma.
Mm-hmm. But when it comes to that, like I've told people before, and maybe you can help me understand, because trauma, when it happens, it changes you
Yep.
forever. I mean, there's no coming back from it. There's no going back to what it was or what it changes you forever. And so, like you said, we have the ability to either face it for what it is, understand that this has happened. There's nothing we can do to make it different other than move forward with life. I mean, how does a person start from that place of realizing things are not going to be the same? Here it is, I lost my child, or here it is, I lost a loved one. Um, all different kinds of things, a job. Especially when you're talking about pandemic trauma, which that's an interesting, concept because of what happened with the pandemic and
Yeah.
how it affected people. So, but that was traumatic too. People lost jobs, they lost income. Things happen with that. I mean, how does someone look at what they're dealing with if they're recognizing that the trauma is part of some of the causes of what they're dealing with, anxiety and all of that?
Mhm.
How, where do they start their recovery? Where do they start the healing process? Where's it
Gonna
start?
come back to the will. So it's going to come back to what you want. As you already stated, if do you want to shape your life around this? It's already changed you.
Mm-hmm.
You want to continue to go in that direction? Do you want to shape your life around it, or do you want to face it?
Mm-hmm.
So, and it also goes back to what we talked about the pain. Like,
Mm-hmm.
do you want to make this pain normal?
Well, okay. Yeah. There you go. All right.
Yeah. Is this something that you want to hang on to? Because here's the thing: yes, trauma changes you; it changes you forever. But the awesome thing about healing is that you have the opportunity, shall I say,
Mm-hmm.
to be transformed again.
Yeah. Woo.
You'll never go back. We all hope. Let me say it this way: we all hope to never go back as we continue to change and transform. Some people have the blessing or the curse, however you look at it, of having things happen that were traumatic that you don't have a choice as to whether or not you're going to go back because you'll never be that person again.
Mm-hmm.
But we all hope to be transformed.
Mm.
So it's not about the pain changed me as much as it is what did it change me into.
My God. Okay.
Yeah.
Wow.
And that part is completely within your power. It's completely within your control because the thing that trauma does, one thing that it does is that it robs a person of that sense of control, of being in control. So that produces the anxiety
Mm-hmm.
because I just don't know what's going to happen. I lost control. I lost innocence. I lost my voice. I lost all of that. But in the healing process, you begin to get that voice back, right? You begin to regain a sense of control.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So you're essentially, and this is one a therapeutic intervention. Actually, you're essentially rewriting the narrative. You are rewriting the story. There's an African proverb that says, "Until the lion learns how to write, the story will always glorify the hunter."
Wow.
Yeah. So
Mm-hmm.
that's something that you want. I when I deal with people with trauma, that's how I start. Like What do you want this to be? Yes, you're not going back, but what are you going to? Are you going to stay? That's an option. Are you going to stay this person, this changed person, or are you going to let this propel you into becoming a new person?
What you said is the reason why I'm just sitting here like this, because a lot of times when something hits me like that, it's almost like it's seeping into my soul because
Mm,
naturally I'm an empath, so I feel things all the time. And I've learned to be, sensitive, in the sense of how God uses me with that and what have you. But I was just sitting here when you said that trauma gives you the opportunity to be able to transform
mhm.
into something different.
Yeah.
It makes you wonder, do you want different?
Hmm.
Okay, I'm gonna leave that alone. I'm gonna leave that alone. That's one of those moments of like, can we someone see that real quick? Because that that was good because you never know that those times that the worst of things that happen is an opportunity for you to transform into something beyond that you probably would have never thought yourself to be, but God already had it in the plan.
All things work together.
Okay, I'm all right. I'm gonna leave it alone. Oh God, because I feel like I can run around this room. Okay, um, I'm so serious because that I remember that the butterfly and the process of what a butterfly is and as far as how it becomes was my story and what I always related myself to what I was going through because I used my trauma to be something to transform me into being who I am now authentically and loving who I am authentically. Never thinking that I could go this far, that it took a traumatic experience for me to push me into this.
Mhm.
But I thank God for you saying that because I think a lot of people need to know
Yeah.
that just because you experience something traumatic doesn't mean that that's where you always have to stay. Maybe it's just an opportunity for God to show you there's more to you than you probably have seen. And maybe you need to see what more can come out
Right.
and transform. Okay, let me ask you. We're almost wrapping up. We got a few minutes left. About what? Yeah, 8 minutes. All right. So let me ask you something that I think I mentioned at the beginning of the broadcast. If somebody's dealing with anxiety, and they're a believer, they believe in God, they have faith, and all that, and that could be possibly a crisis within themselves. You
Sure.
know, how does someone or maybe someone in the faith community can be able to help someone like that? Because sometimes you don't want to demonize something if it's clinical, diagnosis or whatever, but how can someone deal with that crisis of their faith and their belief if they're dealing with anxiety? I mean, what's the best way to go about that where they're not struggling with that crisis with themselves about their faith and what they believe?
Yeah. That's more so of a mindset thing. You're going to have to unlearn what you've learned
Okay.
about faith
Okay. Okay. All
and
right.
God. So that's more of a mindset shift. That's going
Mm-hmm.
to happen when the mind is shift. Because let me give it to you this way: there are two types of people generally when it comes to faith and things that are clinical. There are people that use their faith as a cover up, as a
Mm,
wall. The
my
technical
Lord.
term is spiritual bypassing. So there are individuals that use their faith as a cover up. No, I'm not going to confess that's not me. Whatever. I'm so out of touch with that side of it that I don't even know what people say anymore.
Mm,
But there's a spiritual bypassing element. That's one person. The other person doesn't use their faith to hide, they use their faith to propel. So
okay.
they use their faith,
Teach apostle.
they use their faith to propel them on the healing journey. Like they use it as an agent to assist them. So I'm essentially partnering with God on my healing journey.
Right. Yeah.
So I'm not like it's not an opposition. They're not diametrically opposed. I'm using my faith to give me that courage,
Mm-hmm.
give me that strength that I need to walk this process out. I'm not going to use my faith to cover it up. I'm going to use my faith to push me further along that healing journey.
Okay. So that brings up something that God was dealing with me about when it comes to faith. Because, and you know this, we the word. The just shall live by faith. That phrase is like mentioned 4 times really in the Word of God, once in the Old Testament and 3 times in the New Testament. And when I was studying that particular scripture, the Lord kept telling me about, do you see how the word live and the word faith is here? Live means to is an action word. It means to be active. It means to be doing something. And it's by faith that you are living.
Right.
Because there is a difference between living and existing. And he was like, people are not intentional
Hmm.
in their faith.
Right.
Because if they were, then they would really be living and they wouldn't be choosing to be stagnant where they are. Because
Sure.
you got people who are in believing in God and been saved for 25 years, but they're still on kindergarten level knowledge and faith of knowing the Lord.
Right.
But when you were talking about what you just said in the mindset shift,
Hmm.
faith is not meant to be some spiritual bypass, toxic positivity kind of thing. It's meant to be the thing, like you said, propels you to believe God for more. It propels you to be able to make courageous moves to do things differently. It's meant to challenge you to grow and to be intentional on how you live your life and not just going through the motions. Not just something to say, like, well, I just believe that's not enough. I
Hmm.
I'm sorry, I'm just there. I said that. I tell people, I said, listen, being saved is not enough, man. You got to believe more than that. I
Yeah.
said, you got to have faith. I mean, you got to live intentionally. I
Right.
said, I'll know that you're about something when I see you growing and changing. But if you just still sitting there and say, well, I believe God, I said, yeah, but he said you could do a lot more with that. But you just choose to do what you do. But
Hmm.
yeah, that's very true. Thank you for sharing that with me. Oh
Absolutely.
God. We could be on here for another 30 minutes, probably another for an hour. I know. Talking about all this stuff, but I understand that we only have so much time in a day, and this is a loving Father here, and I dare not want to take any more time away from His beautiful, precious child. That's good. But I want to say thank you,
My pleasure.
Apostle, for being with us today, because you dropped some knowledge and some gems that I know for me personally has changed my life, and it's going to be things that I'm going to use to share with people, especially that part about trauma being the thing that can transform you.
Yes.
Okay. So listen. Before we get too far away, let's share with the people how they can get to you, how they can find you, where are you, social media, all that wonderful stuff. Please share with the people how they can get in touch with you if maybe they want to have you come to share, what have you. So you can do that for me.
Absolutely. Thank you. Well, you can go to my website. It's thejoshuasmith.com, thejoshuasmith.com, and you'll find everything you need there as it relates even to resources, books that I have, courses that I have, upcoming events, and also how to book me. My social media accounts are pretty much that same. Is Instagram is at the Joshua Smith. I think Facebook is the Joshua P. Smith.
Mhm.
But you can reach me on either the website or on social media. I'd be happy to connect.
All right, awesome. And I'm glad that you connected with me. I was very grateful for your staff and everyone being as gracious towards me and also understanding, that this is a new thing that I'm doing on a grassroots level. But
Yeah.
I thank you for being part of that journey. Thank you for being now finding it robbery to take your time to be with us and sharing this safe conversation. Hopefully, we can be able to have you back on definitely again. Maybe to discuss from the aspect of ministry and marketplace. I would like to really probe into that a little bit more because I think that's the lane that I'm going in. I want to say, like, what can we do to make that a little more successful, not just for me but other maybe faith leaders that are in that area.
Okay.
Okay, well, listen, I'm gonna pray. I'm gonna ask you to pray us out, but before I do, I just want to make a couple announcements, and that is, ladies and gentlemen, this is the season finale of the Lighthouse of Dr. T. So guess what? That means that we won't be back on again until January. So join us on the first Saturday of January 2024. And the topic, everybody, is going to be narcissism in the pulpit. And it's going to be a 2-hour premiere. I do have a surprise guest I'm working on to be part of that broadcast. And you guys don't want to miss this because this is an issue that we need to address. Because not only because, like we talked about tonight, that it affects, with the person that's in leadership, but also who it affects and how it's being used and what can we do to try to get on the road of deliverance and healing in this area. So we'll be back on the first Saturday of January 2024 with a new season for the Lighthouse with Dr. T. We actually got maybe the first quarter already kind of filled up already. So to God be the glory for that as far as guests. And then also NAMI Pensacola, NAMI Florida. We're going to have our Sharing Hope event, our safe space conversation. And we're going to have Monique Darnell all the way from Pensacola, Florida. She just moved here from Atlanta, Georgia. She's going to be our guest with us, and we're going to talk about the things that we deal with as a Black people, and when it comes to mental health, the dynamics, the culture dynamics, and things like that, in a safe space for everybody. This is a statewide virtual event. I'm excited that NAMI felt passionate enough that they wanted to back me doing this. And so I give God the glory and a favor of that. So definitely go to my website, go to NAMI Florida website, register, please, because we want this to be a success. So we'll see you definitely at that time. So, Apostle, do you mind praying us out tonight?
No problem. Okay. Father, we thank you for this day and we thank you for this moment in time that we've had. Father, I thank you for your blessing that has been upon us. I thank you even for the tongue of the learned that we give words and season to them that are weary. So, Father, I just bless this time that we've had together. And I pray for those that are watching live, those that are watching the replay. I even pray for the host. I pray, God, for great grace, great peace, great strength. God, I pray, God, that you would give us all the courage to start and continue our healing journey. Your word said about the lepers that as they went, they were healed. And so, Father, we thank you for the process. We thank you for going from trauma to triumph. We thank you you're causing us to triumph in you. I thank you for the transformation that is taking place in the lives of your people. Now connect them, God, to the right people, to the right resources in the name of Jesus, that they'll be able to continue the healing journey and even be that change agent that is needed and necessary in their circle, in their church, in their city, in their region, in their community. And so, Father, I bless us in the name of Jesus. And I thank you, God, that you're going to continue to work in us, both to will and to do of your good pleasure. And we give you praise for all things in Jesus' name. Amen.
Amen. Thank you so much, Apostle, again. All right, everybody. See you in January 2024 in the new year. Blessings, everybody. Thank you. And end.